Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to another fun filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk about the world's most famous streaming service and the most popular, and this is Spotify. Now, Spotify's been around for a while. I think it came out originally in 2008, first in its home country of Sweden and a few other places, but in a few short years, it was everywhere. Now, let's just take a look at some of these numbers about the popularity of various streaming services. And if this was a professional stream, I would have had this up ahead of time. But this is a freewheeling stream, and I don't charge you anything, so you have no right to complain. So let's look at the statistics and see which streaming service is most popular. Which DTT. Here we go. Okay. So the metric that I want to look at is number of active users. Okie dokie. So it looks like the most popular worldwide is QQ Music. Now, you might not have heard of QQ Music, and if you're not Chinese, then I wouldn't be surprised. But QQ Music is China's answer to Spotify because even though when it comes to most sort of streaming services, most cloud based solutions, most sort of software in general, social media, they tend to be US companies that have something of an international presence. But China has its own technological ecosystem, not just with hardware in many cases, but also with software. And QQ Music, which is not available throughout the world, it's mainly based in China and other parts of Asia. They have the highest number of active monthly users at 660 million. And it looks as though they also have that's forget that. Yeah, highest number of monthly active users at 660 million. Spotify then worldwide is second, so number one in most countries that aren't China, but 602 million monthly active users. Not bad at all. And then after that, you've got some of the services that I wouldn't necessarily consider streaming services. You've got SoundCloud, which it's not music streaming in a traditional sense, but it's a good platform. Then you've got iHeartRadio, which is also sort of more podcast driven. But one thing interesting as well is the third most popular streaming service in the world, which is a music streaming service in the traditional sense, is called Yayo Savin. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. This is based in India. And while India has access generally to all of the major US derived or European platforms, because Spotify technically is European, that we know and love, India also has its own technology ecosystem. It's not one that is sort of as self sustaining as China's, but there are a lot of platforms that are India exclusive because Indians generally listen to Indian content as opposed to sort of American or world content. Remember the whole thing with PewDiePie when he was saying, "Oh, I'm not the number one YouTuber anymore because this Indian company that plays Bollywood music videos is." That's an example of just how huge the Indian creative ecosystem is. It's really big. So of the ones that someone in the US or Europe would be familiar with, Spotify is number one. And then in terms of a traditional music service, then you've got Apple Music, and that has just over 100 million monthly active monthly users compared to 600 over 600 million for Spotify. So you can see just how much bigger Spotify is than Apple, which is saying quite a lot because when it comes to phones in America, Apple has cornered that market. Apple TV is going strong. I mean, Apple is a huge, huge company. I mean, the entire stock market arguably lives and dies by Apple. Some would say Nvidia, but I would say Apple. But when it comes to music streaming, Spotify, which began as a small Swedish company at a time that Apple was what it is today, a huge technology company, it's managed to hold on to its spot as the top streaming service. Going down the line, you then have YouTube Music. YouTube, obviously the most popular video streaming platform, but not one of the most popular music streaming platforms. And then as we go down the list, we have things like Amazon Music, again, number one e-commerce platform in the history of the world, but 100 million rather monthly active users, so similar numbers to Apple. And then you've got Tidal, which has around the same, just over 100 million monthly active users. I personally love Tidal because they give you music in FLAC, uncompressed, and a lot of the selections are available in high resolution audio. So that's 2496 PCM, and in some cases 24192 PCM. Now let's try to look at what has made Spotify successful. Now, Spotify was the first kid on the block. When Apple was still selling downloads, Spotify had a radically new way of consuming music that they brought to the table, which is streaming. So you don't have to download it onto a hard drive and then upload it to your own cloud. You're streaming music directly from Spotify's cloud. So that means you don't have to worry about taking up space on your device. You don't have to worry about taking up space on your own cloud drive. You just have a monthly subscription and you're good to go. And this was, from a financial point of view, revolutionary at the time. I spoke a few episodes ago about what's the ultimatum that Steve Jobs made to the music industry in the early 2000s. The music industry in the late 90s foolishly sued Napster out of existence. Napster being a peer to peer software that allowed users around the world to share music files. And it took the music industry by surprise. And what was their solution? Well, let's just sue the hell out of it, where they should have either acquired it or worked with Napster to come up with the format where people could either pay a small fee, or it could be ad supported, or even don't even monetize it for the first couple of years. Just let the technology populate among its user base, and you can always figure out how to monetize it later. That's one of the interesting things with technology in particular. If a technology is good and useful, and because of that becomes popular, there's always a way to monetize it. You can always find a way eventually, even if it isn't overly apparent at first. That's what they could have, should have done with Napster. And the fact that iTunes, now Apple Music, and Spotify, and so many others have become successful, YouTube Music, it shows that the music industry, the record labels of the 90s, really dropped the ball. They shot themselves in the foot. No other way to describe it. So they sued Napster out of existence, and you have the Napster clones that are even harder to sort of regulate, your Kazars and your LimeWires, etc. And that's when Steve Jobs made the music industry an offer they couldn't refuse. He told them, okay, we're going to make music downloading so safe and so convenient and so cheap that people will be willing to pay for it to do pay. They will be willing to pay for it to do it the legal way. And the industry said, that sounds great. What's the plan to monetize it? He said, I'm going to sell every song for $1. And that's it. They won't be bundled with albums unless you want them to be, but every song will be $1. And the music industry was shocked because the price of physical formats in the 90s and early 2000s was exorbitant. When you think about how in the 90s the average compact disc ranged anywhere between 14 and 20 bucks, sometimes more. And when you look at how everything else in the world has gone up because of inflation, cars, food, housing, everything, clothes, furniture, but the price of a physical format, when you can buy a CD, which you still can today, the prices of CDs have actually gone down. So they've fallen below the level of inflation, where the price of LPs have remained rather stable. And Dave Esposito of the In Groove Records actually made the argument that when you consider all the various forms of inflation, LPs have actually become cheaper than they were 50 years ago. So that just shows you how badly the music industry was sticking it to the consumer in the 90s. And Steve Jobs came up with an elegant solution. The music industry didn't like that, but he said, look, either you can do this or you can die. And they had no choice. Like I said, it's an offer you couldn't refuse. I'm terrible. I'm, not the best Marlon Brando, but it's a free show. So that's what happened then. A few years later, like I said, Spotify comes around and makes the process, so long as you have a relatively stable internet connection, they make it even easier. Now you don't even need to download it. And for the price of, I think when Spotify came out, it might have been $6. So or something around that. So for the price of around 6 songs downloaded on the old iTunes, you can now have an access to the world's largest public music library in Spotify's cloud. And they've gone on from there. Now, the biggest complaint that I've always had about Spotify is that the audio quality it's data compressed. They really need to introduce lossless, meaning audio where the data isn't compressed. So CD quality or above. So Tidal, their big thing when they came out is high res, and they continue to improve the quality. They got rid of this weird MQA or MQM. I forget what it was. It was this weird encoded crap no one liked. Now they got regular old FLAC for both their CD quality and their high res, and the sound quality is wonderful. Apple has now gone to all non-compressed for all of their users. They did it without increasing their prices. Amazon, like Tidal, has options for both CD quality and high res. Spotify does not. And so the sound quality on Spotify is objectively worse than on Tidal, on Qobuz, on Amazon, and on Apple. So why do they remain so successful? Well, their user interface, even though it gets a bit worse with every update, truth be told, it's still generally the most user friendly. Not that the others are not user friendly, they're all kind of similar, but the Spotify user interface has just been generally good, and even when they ruin it every now and then, it's still good enough to consider being the best. And they've expanded into things like audiobooks and podcasts, and other people have that too. For a while, they had Joe Rogan exclusively. Now they let him post it on the other platforms, including the YouTube as well. But Spotify looks like it's here to stay. But they've really been treating people who care about the quality of their sound like crap for a long time, and they've been doing a lot of rug pulls when it comes to Broken Promises. Good song by Survivor, by the way. For a while. So in 2001, when everyone was still locked in their home in most places, forced to listen to music and go increasingly insane, they announced something called Spotify Hi-Fi. Now, the details were not very forthcoming, but they did say that it would have been out by the end of 2021. That date kept being pushed back and back until they finally said, look, we'll have it someday, but we don't know where, don't know when. And that's kind of where we were until very recently, when it came out that Spotify Hi-Fi, the broken promise of 2021, is going to come back as something called Spotify Pro. Again, the details have sort of trickled through the media, and we kind of know what's on there, but there are some interesting elements that could potentially make Spotify Hi-Fi something more than just a high resolution streaming service, even though, frankly, that's all most of us would have asked for. But they are offering some other interesting things, allegedly. They're offering people tools to what they call mix music. Now, I don't know what they mean by that. Are they going to do something that I think would be really cool and offering people the stems, the multi tracks of various songs so that we could create our own mixes? Let's take the vocals out of, out of China Grove. Let's listen to Stairway to Heaven with just the keyboards and the drums. Let's listen to Michael Jackson's Thriller with just the keyboards and a bit of vocal. Are they going to, in other words, let us do our own remixes by giving us the multi tracks to, have little digital faders that we can go up and down with? Can we apply our own EQ? All that sort of thing. I hope that's what it means, because that would be really cool. Does it mean sort of having our own sort of DJ platform built in so that we can mix in the other sense songs together? Two virtual turntables and a microphone, as Beck would have said if he was Gen Z. That would be pretty cool too. And again, all this is totally doable technologically. With the stems, there's issues of licensing, but if they could license all of the masters, then maybe they can license the stems. A lot of gaming platforms like GTA, I think, or Rock. What is it? Guitar Hero and Rock Band, they've got that stuff licensed. So other tech companies in that broader tech space have licensed that stuff before. So it's definitely doable. And they say that they'll integrate concert ticket sales, which is, I guess, kind of a no-brainer. They want to integrate AI stuff, and I don't know to what level. Maybe will they have something built into the platform where instead of sort of going to sort of other premium music AI softwares, you could type into Spotify, make me a version of My Way as if it were sung by Metallica, or turn a song done in a minor key into a major key, but keep the other elements of the composition the same. These are all different things that, depending on how advanced the AI is, you could theoretically have it do. Uh, so there's a lot of promise, and they say that it will be $6 extra a month, which, if they really are delivering all of these features, then I guess it would be worth it. But one thing that troubles me is they're saying that when they say hi-fi, they mean CD quality, 1644.1. They don't mean 2496. For people who don't know what that means, the first number is the number of bits, and the second number is the rate at which the bits sample. Both of those things affect sound quality. The higher of either of them, the better, except if you're in DSD, which only has a single bit, but the sample rate is in the thousands. And so it's just two different ways to, skin the same horse. So they better have high res, is what I'm saying. Otherwise, there's an entire segment of their user base who like Tidal, but also like Spotify, and would like the option, at least, of having a Spotify where, yeah, for a bit more a month, people would have the ability to listen to music at the high res quality that's available on Qobuz and Tidal and Amazon Now, and to downloaded places like HD Tracks. There's really no good reason that they cannot do it. Other platforms do it. The technology has long been around for something that takes a bit more bandwidth to do that with. So the only excuse, frankly, if they don't do that, is laziness. They don't want to acquire those high res tracks by doing deals with the record labels. I don't know what it is, but if they're doing all this AI and mixing stuff, which takes up a lot more space in the cloud, a lot more computing power, then why aren't they giving the audiophile community what we want? And we're not asking for much, but and yeah, it's a niche. It's not the majority of people, but even that being said, everyone in that community would be willing to pay $5 or $6 extra a month. Most people have Spotify accounts anyway, even if they use Tidal or Qobuz, and they'd be willing to pay a tiny bit more, maybe even per month, to have the tracks that are available in high res, to access those via Spotify. So I, I would say that Spotify should run before it walks. All of these mixing and AI features are great, and I could frankly see them charging as much as 15 extra a month for that. But maybe for 6 extra a month, just give people the audiophile option. So in a perfect world, you'd have the free Spotify with the ads. Then you'd have an ad-free Spotify. Then you'd have an audiophile Spotify, which would be just like regular Spotify, but with 2496 and 24192 high-res tracks available. And then you can have this pro thing, which has the audiophile stuff, but also has what I'm assuming would be DJ tools, what I would assume would be sort of mixing tools, what I assume would be all of this AI stuff, and maybe, just maybe, you could have multiple masterings of the same album. Maybe you could even work out some deals between the record companies and the audiophile labels like MoFi and Acoustic Sounds Analog Productions to say, look, we want to license your version, your mastering of these albums, because then it would be a really audiophile platform. It wouldn't just be the high-res files provided by the labels, it would be high-res files that were mastered by the best engineers in the world on the best equipment in the world. And so long as everyone gets something, because everyone wants some, you want some too. So long as the labels, the tech companies, and these audiophile companies that actually did the work to create these audiophile masters of these albums, so long as everyone gets something out of it, and you could absolutely structure it so that they could then it would really be a win-win all over. And I think it's really high time they do that. The customer is there, the user base is there. They're willing to pay. All of these masters that these audiophile labels licensed for hard formats, for physical formats, they could work out some sort of deal with the labels to sort of do some sort of reverse license or a profit share or something to get those versions onto streaming. I talked about that just yesterday when we talked about the story with MoFi having an SACD crisis, because one of the 2 or 3 SACD manufacturing plants in the world is shutting down for the next 3 months. Maybe longer. Maybe they're not telling the truth about how long they're shutting down. And so, because of that, the elegant solution for digital would be to work out some agreement, some licensing agreement where people could download the stuff or maybe even stream it on a premium hi-fi streaming service. Just work out the deals with the lawyers and accountants so that everyone's happy. It can be done. If you're a doer, there's always a will. When there's a will, there is a way. And that would allow these audiophile labels to concentrate on the areas where physical formats are the only thing available. And that's in the analog world, LPs and reel to reel tapes. And if you're having a concert ticket buying platform in Spotify, why not have a platform where analog productions can have a store within Spotify? You can buy maybe for an extra fee, whatever, the streaming and downloads from them. And you can also order, your next UHQR directly within Spotify. You can have a MoFi store, an MPEG store. You can have anything. The possibilities are endless. You can have artists sell merch directly to people that way, which, yeah, it might not be as profitable as when they do it directly through their website, but I would assume that they would make it up on the volume. I think Spotify actually already has that, but I definitely think you could take it to the next level. So if Spotify is going to be made great again, there are actually a lot of things they could do, but I would say walk before you can run. Start with the audiophile stuff, then branch off to the more interactive and immersive stuff. Frankly, after all the time they've wasted between announcing Spotify Hi-Fi and today, they really owe it to us to release all of it at once. So come on, Spotify. You have, or at least had, a great product. You're falling behind the times. Don't wait till you fall behind in terms of the numbers before you give us what we want. That's my advice. I think I'm right. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment. And as always, we will see you next time. Take care.